Hello all you fellow musicians and gamers out there, this is Clarinetgamer here, and I'm here with a review for the first time in what has been, well, several months at least, or maybe up to a year. I am excited to do a review, and yes, this is none other than Tekken 1, as you could tell from the title. Now, I will say this much, I'm going to be self-criticising my review immediately from the get-go. Well, what I'm going to do in my next review is I'm going to be doing like face cam, like to do an introduction based on like what I think of the game, and then basically I'm going to be doing like gameplay features to back up my points that I'm going to be stating for the reviews that I'm going to be doing in the future, but for now I'm just going to be using gameplay. Just to say that right now, in case some of you might have the same thoughts, like for me, like using gameplay footage to back up like what I'm saying, like for what's good and what's bad about the game, and like just a face cam to basically tell my thoughts on the game, and you could tell by like my reactions on what I think of the game. So anyway, let me just start off by saying, like, for Tekken 1, I think it's a good game, and I'll get on and into why it's good and the negative points about it as well. So a little bit of history about this game. Tekken 1 was released back in late 1994 on the arcade machines, as you may know or you may have heard of, and later on the PS1 in 1995 as one of the first ever PlayStation games that ever came out, alongside, well, other games like Ridge Racer and Air Combat as two examples. And it was one of the first ever fighting games released on PS1. Like at the time, it was, I think, released alongside, well, maybe not alongside, but close to the time with Virtua Fighter, Sega's Virtua Fighter, 3D Fighter. And it was developed and published by Namco, who also developed the games I mentioned, Air Combat and Ridge Racer. So without further ado, I'm just going to dive into this review and say what I think is good about it and what's bad about it. Now, the story-wise, there isn't really that much revealed about the story when you first play Tekken 1. I mean, it's all just got the cutscenes in there. I mean, it doesn't really tell you that much about the story. It looks like just a normal fighting game, but now that later story details have been revealed, basically, the back plot of the story is that, like, Kazuya Mishima, who's the main character in this game, his father, Heihachi Mishima, when Kazuya was a child, like about 5 years old, Heihachi Mishima, like, he was tired of his son's weakness and abilities, and he threw him off of a cliff to prove, well, he was truly a son. And if he could survive the fall and climb back up, then he was truly a son. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great family right there. Or that's a brilliant father right there. No, not really. No. That's a monstrous father right there, if you ask me. But anyway, enough about me giving my opinion on Heihachi. Just continue with this review. So it's a great story, and basically Kazuya is the main character, and he's fighting in this tournament to basically get vengeance on his father, and rightfully so, for doing that to him. So there's that. But I think, I don't know if I really want to spoil anything that much, but I am playing as Kazuya at the moment, as you can see in the arcade mode that I've recorded for this review. And basically what would happen at the end of the game is, like, if you defeat the boss at the end, which is Heihachi on stage 9, then you'll get like an ending for different characters, with the exception of the sub-bosses, which I'll go into later, but you'll get endings for the different main characters so you can play as. Specifically Kazuya's one, which you'll see at the end of this video clip if it'll get up there. If not, then I can always edit it in, just to show you what happens at the end. So anyway, I would say for the story, it's really good. For rating wise out of 10, I would give it maybe at least 8 out of 10, because I mean, I think it would have been nice to like maybe get an insight into the other characters as well as just the Mishima family. I mean, I think. So anyway, the gameplay itself, now you're able to choose from 8 different fighters, which gives players a fighting style best suited to them. So for me personally, like, I can choose, like, out of all these 8 characters, Kazuya is mainly the one that I'm most suited for. To be honest, that's the fighting style I like most. But there are other characters that I like to play as, for example, like King, Law, all these. I think King and Law specifically, maybe Paul as well. Like, just those 3 characters along with Kazuya. I mean, those are the fighting styles that I like the most. Yoshimitsu as well, I mean, I'm not forgetting about him. And you go through 9 different stages, which is great structure for the gameplay. I mean, like I said before, there's 9 stages in the arcade mode. And versus mode, when you play with a friend or a family member, is always great. I mean, there's always great to have it playing against a friend on this game. And you get unlockables in this game as well. You get sub-bosses unlocked by beating the game with regular characters. So say, for example, if you played as Kazuya, the sub-boss that you would have is Lee Chow Lane, and if you manage to beat the game with Kazuya, then you'll get Lee unlocked as a playable character, and so on and so forth with all the other regular characters. Now to unlock Heihachi, you need to beat the game without using a continue, which I think is great because it is pretty challenging, and it could be pretty easy with the difficulty setting depending on what it is, because you could put it up to like the easiest mode is easy obviously, but there's also the hardest difficulty, which is ultra hard. If you really wanted to give yourself a challenge, then go for ultra hard mode, but honestly I think it's hard enough as it is without ultra hard mode. But the last unlockable that you can get is a costume for Kazuya, a third costume for Kazuya. There's different costumes you can have for the characters you play as, but for Kazuya there's 3 costumes. Basically there's a Devil Kazuya costume, and to unlock that, the minigame that you saw at the beginning of this video, the Galaga game, you need to beat the game perfectly, and not just that one stage. I think there's like at least 8 or 9 challenging stages that you have to beat perfectly, get all 40 hits, which I think is it's asking for quite a lot actually. Depending on if you're a fan of these old arcade games and you're really willing to put yourself through it, then by all means, but it's just for me, it's a really hard challenge. It's ridiculously hard actually, the reward being, I think, a bit unfulfilling in my opinion, because if it was something else like maybe a secret character that you didn't know about that's really like great in this game, then it would definitely be more fulfilling from my point of view. So anyway, the gameplay itself, I would say for a rating out of 10, it's your standard fighting game. It's pretty good. I mean, the gameplay itself, I would say, again, I would probably give that 8 out of 10, I think, because of the ridiculously hard like setting that you have to do to unlock the Devil Kazuya costume in the Galaga game. And I think that's the only thing that prevented it from getting a higher score, I think. The graphics, now the backgrounds look good. Now let me just say this much before I go on about this. I'm not going to compare this with the later Tekken games because that's not really fair. I'll do my best not to do that anyway, but I'm not going to compare that with the later Tekken games. But the backgrounds look good. Excuse me, but they're not like full, like they're not like dynamic in a way. The character models, some of them have pretty strange like facial expressions, especially like on the arcade selection screen. But I mean, that's probably what made the game unique at the time. The cutscenes look okay as well, like especially like in the introduction, like they're okay, but they're not that great, as you may know. But like as far as it goes for out of 10 when it comes to graphics, I would say because it's an LAPS1 game, I'll cut it quite a lot of slack. So I would say out of 10, I would give it 7 out of 10 for the graphics. That's what I would give it there. Now as far as it goes for the controls, now the controls are very unique compared to past fighting games, because as far as I know for a Street Fighter, now I've never really played Street Fighter on this, so correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you get like special moves I think if you press certain buttons like in Street Fighter, and it might be the same for Virtua Fighter, but I'm not entirely sure. But the controls are quite unique in this game because each button, and this will be in later Tekken games as well, but each button corresponds to a character's certain like body part or limb. For example, like if you press square, it responds to like a character's fist. Like a character's fist will respond to like if you press square, and if you press X, for example, it'll respond to like the feet and leg moves. However, on the downside, the controls are a bit stiff. Like the game is quite stiff in a way. Like I mean, that was with old fighting games back then. It was quite stiff back then in like 1995, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, I think I've seen quite a lot of people were complaining about the controls, saying they're really stiff, but to be honest, like for me personally, I think the controls are a bit stiff, but they're not that bad from my point of view. So as far as goes for the controls, I would give that, again, 7 out of 10 for that, because of the stiff controls, maybe putting it off a bit. Now as far as it goes for, let me just check how long this has been so far. Okay, nearly 10 minutes, okay. So I've still got plenty of time to go through this. I've only got like at least a bit more, like 2 more points to go through here. So how fun is the game, and is it worth replaying it? Now if you're a fighting game fan, I would definitely suggest, if you've never played the Tekken game series before, which I'm pretty sure the majority of you have, but if you've never played the first Tekken game, I would recommend getting it, because it can be very addicting if you're a fighting game fan, and it can increase the challenge. Like say for example, for me personally, it can be fun, but at the same time it can be really frustrating, especially if you're playing on easy mode, because the stages get ridiculously hard even if you're on easy mode. So imagine, I've never played ultra hard mode on this game, so if you're facing Heihachi on ultra hard mode, good luck, because honestly I think you're going to need it, because it's going to take at least maybe 50 attempts to beat Heihachi on ultra hard mode. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, besides the fact it can be really frustrating, like when you go into the later stages, which is well logical, because I mean the further stages you go up, the harder the game will get, obviously, but it's still quite hard facing Heihachi on easy mode. But you can increase the challenge if you want, like by putting it up to like normal, hard, ultra hard, like I said before. And it's fun with 2 people on the versus mode as well. You can only play with 2 different characters, but I think from my point of view, maybe they could have added some other game features. I mean, it's just like the standard fighting game you would expect. Like you got arcade versus mode, which is fine, which I think is really good. I mean, it's fine. So I would say, how fun is the game, despite some of its frustrating aspects of like the stages getting ridiculously harder as you go along, like especially the final stage. I think it's really fun, for me personally, and especially like the minigame you got at the beginning as well, if you're an arcade fan. And is it worth replaying? I would say so, yes, because if you're really wanting to like play through all the characters, then it's definitely worth replaying every now and again, or every time actually, if you want to like go through each and every character. And if you play as the sub-bosses, unfortunately you won't get an extra character, so that's the downside of it as well. But how fun is the game, and the replay value out of 10, I would say 8 out of 10 personally. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And now as far as it goes, now in conclusion for this review, it's a great fighting game to start off the Tekken series, but it's far from perfect because, and I'll just sum up the negative points again. Basically, the story could have been told maybe a bit more from other characters' perspectives, as well as like Kazuya's one, even though it really wasn't made like that much clear in the first Tekken game. The gameplay, as far as goes like the unlockables, the only thing that put me off on the gameplay was like the Devil Kazuya costume. Like for unlocking that, it's ridiculously difficult. Like I said, the graphics, they were okay, but they weren't that great in comparison to like, I mean, let me stop there, because I mean I was going to say in comparison to other games in 1995, like for example Rayman, but to be honest, I'll give Namco like some slack, because I mean this was the first fighting game I think they developed for the PS1, so I mean they did a good job of it. The graphics were okay, but they could have been better, I mean, which they were in Tekken 2, but the controls, they're a bit stiff, and the frustrating thing about the game is that like the stages get harder, but like ridiculously hard, like especially when you go to Heihachi. I know I'm repeating myself here, but it's just like summing up my points here. But that's the thing, that's the only factors there, the negative factors that make the game far from perfect. Apart from that, all the other positive aspects I mentioned, I would say really makes the game worth playing from my point of view. So I would say an overall rating for this game would be, for me, 8 out of 10. So it's great, but it's not perfect. So overall guys, that's my review of Tekken 1. Please feel free to like if you enjoyed, comment down below for your thoughts, and also please feel free to subscribe as well for more reviews coming up on Wednesdays as well. And also, what I mentioned at the beginning from me using Facecam like for these reviews as well as transitioning to like different parts of the gameplay for particular games I'll be reviewing in the future, please feel free to let me know about that, or please feel free to leave me any tips or hints or anything like that I'll take into account. But I have seen quite a lot of people doing it on YouTube nowadays, but I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure whether I should do that, because like the thing I'm doing right now, I'm not sure if it's quite unique in a way, but it'd be a lot more popular if I maybe did like include my face cam or something like that in these reviews. But feel free to let me know about that, guys, because I mean I'd like to hear your thoughts on that strategy or that method. I know it's entirely up to me, but I'd be curious to hear your opinions on it. So anyway guys, that's my review. This is Clarinetgamer here signing off. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and I shall speak to you later on. Till then, goodbye.